For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith, joined by Connor Morrissette for instant analysis from another road loss for USC, this time 26-21 at the hands of the Washington Huskies at Husky Stadium. And Connor, once again, it's the same story for USC. Trojans fall to 4-5, and they're still yet to win a road game on the year.
And they had a fourth quarter lead in this game again, early in the fourth, when Washington went up on them, but a fourth quarter lead nonetheless. So in their 5 road losses this year, their 5 conference losses, they've had fourth quarter leads in all of them. It's bizarre that they haven't been able to win one of these games, but eventually you are what you are. I thought Lincoln Riley had 2 quotes that will rub people the wrong way in the post-game interview. He said, "It's not like we're getting our ass kicked out there," which I guess is technically true. They have been in all of these games, but when you've lost 5 games, and I think, 4 out of their last 5, you kind of are getting your ass kicked, so unacceptable. And then he said, "I know that there's progress here. I know when you have the people in the building that we have, we're going to see progress moving forward." And do you have the right people in the building right now? I think that's a fair question when they have their 5th loss here on November, whatever day of the month it is. It's just so early in the season to have their 5th loss. They didn't have that last season until the last game of the season, so they're on pace to be worse than they were a year ago. Things are trending in the wrong direction. 11-1 the first year, 7-5 the second year. They could be 6-6 or maybe even worse this season. They're 4-5 right now. There hasn't been any progress. So that is a quote that I understand you have to try to talk people off the ledge after another loss, but man, things are not good right now.
It feels like sequentially the record is going to get worse and worse. USC right now is an uphill battle to make a bowl. Nebraska didn't look great today, but UCLA did, and they play those 2 teams out of a bye and then Notre Dame. I feel like best case scenario for USC is 2-1, and that's to qualify for a C-tier, D-tier bowl at 6-6, and when 11-1, like you mentioned, 7-5, I really don't see a world where it's better than 6-6, and that's simply unacceptable at USC. And I get what Lincoln Riley is saying, because there are individual players or individual things that have been improved, but I don't want to hear about improvements if the wins aren't following. And maybe you can say that in something like year 1, hey, we're making improvements, and that means that things will get better going forward, like we have a better outlook for future years. But when you're in year 3 and the win-loss record is getting worse, I don't think it really matters what the improvements on the field are.
Totally agree. And the bottom line is they just need to win more games. It doesn't really matter too much what he says at the end of the game in that post-game press conference, but I wish he'd just come out and say, we're going to reevaluate everything. This is unacceptable. I haven't done a good enough job. And he said that second part a little bit, but he still believes in his process and what he's building, and it's just tough to hear him say that when the results aren't there. So very frustrating, and just another game where USC lets it slip away. You are what your record says you are, and they're 4-5, even though they have been close. Lincoln Riley called it an anomaly of a season. Usually some of these plays go your way, but I mean, not with this team. This season they have just been historically bad blowing fourth quarter leads. We saw that after the Maryland game. They were the only team to be up in the fourth quarter in all 7 of their games and then be under 500. So this team is historically bad at closing out games, and that starts with the head coach, in my opinion.
Yeah, and specifically this one, I thought the first half reminded me a bit of Michigan, where USC just seemed outclassed and wasn't stopping anyone defensively, couldn't get anything going, and refused to run the ball offensively. And the second half reminded me a lot of that Minnesota game, where they had the football and a chance to go and take a big lead, up 21-20. Right at the end of the third quarter. What happens in both of those games? In Minnesota, Miller Moss gets hit. He throws a pick. This time, just a very poor decision. And he throws a pick to Carson Bruner for the second time. It's his 3rd pick of the day. And while you can write off the first 2, one on a drop from Kyle Ford, the other on a Hail Mary to send it to halftime, the third was one of the worst decisions, probably right up there with the Maryland throw that he made for a pick. And it feels like a consistent theme in a lot of these USC losses, especially on the road, is a late costly pick from Miller Moss. And we have defended him this season. You and I both have said we think he should be the starter. At 4-5, I'm ready to reevaluate anything, and there's no better time to do it than this week, coming off of maybe his worst performance in terms of 3 picks, and with a bye week ahead. There's nothing to lose at this point at 4-5. I think I might be talking myself off of the Miller Moss train, because this is just a game I'm not sure you come back from. And he still had a chance to go down there and lead a game-winning drive. That's what's so painful for USC. But if they're able to get a win, you write off some of the issues, like the inability and the unwillingness to run the ball in the first half, or the 3 picks. Instead, now you can revisit everything back to the first minute of the ball game because USC lost again by 1 score.
Yeah, the quarterback wasn't good enough tonight, and that's been a theme here in these road losses. So I'm with you 100%, Jack. The funny thing is, Miller Moss gets in these positions where USC's down, but then he brings the team back, and tonight he got the team up 21-20 with a really great third quarter, and then in the fourth quarter things sort of fell apart a little bit. So it's hard to say like he deserved to be benched during the game, because in the third quarter he brought him back, but like moving forward, I think you're absolutely right. At 4-5, what do you have to lose? Let's see what Jaden Mayava can do these last three games. Like, I don't think you run the risk of losing the locker room. Like, you're 4-5. There's really not much to play for outside of two rivalry games where you're playing for pride. But like, you got to treat these last three games as the preseason for next year, as sad as that sounds. So I'd love to see Jaden come in. And yeah, Miller Moss, he had a chance at the end to win the game, and he didn't do it. Mason Murphy had a terrible game tonight. Four false starts, and then he was beaten on the final play, that fourth down, the turnover on downs. But that was one play in a series of plays. USC had chances. Moss had a ton of time on previous plays on that last drive when they turned the ball over on downs. So yeah, he wasn't good enough tonight. The play calling offensively in the first half wasn't good enough tonight, and those are just two consistent themes here in these losses.
Yeah, the Trojans were the first team to complete 60% of their passes against Washington. They also threw for nearly 300 yards to a group that normally allows just 123 passing yards per game. They outgained the Huskies, and all of that to say they still found a way to lose. 3 turnovers will do that, and also playing unlike themselves in the red zone will do that. Washington's a team that only scored touchdowns on about 50% of its red zone trips this season. Today, they had 4 red zone drives. They scored 3 red zone touchdowns and had a field goal. USC goes into the red zone 4 times, scored touchdowns the first 2 times, but in the fourth quarter, they have a first and goal from, I believe it was the 4-yard line. They don't score anything. And then late in the game as well, on a 4th down, Mason Murphy gets blown by. And just for some reason, an offensive line that I thought played pretty well tonight for the most part had a horrible blow up on both 4th downs, one a run and one a pass. When you let Washington play better than it has this season in the red zone, and you yourself go scoreless on 2 red zone trips in the fourth quarter while turning the ball over 3 times. Like, you can talk about progress, but those are mistakes that just can't be made. And Lincoln Riley will bring up the progress. I'd be there saying that's unacceptable, because it is.
No sacks again tonight for USC's defensive line. We saw Greedy Vance have just a killer unsportsmanlike conduct penalty where Washington would have had a 3rd down. They were in field goal range. They were right by the goal line, but that pretty much gifted them a touchdown. So the defense isn't at fault here either. I like what I saw from Sam Green tonight. Cameron Fountain had a few nice moments, but consistently this year, this team has not been able to get to the quarterback. And there were some pressures, but again, no sacks. It's the same old story with this team. The defense is better than it was last season, but they're not good enough to overcome some of the mistakes that we see from the offense, especially the 3 turnovers. So it's a whole operational failure this season. The play calling's bad. I haven't loved what I've seen from the roster construction, which I've talked a ton about. The quarterback hasn't been as good as he was against LSU. The offensive line's been up and down. Like, there are a lot of problems with this team, and when you have that number of problems, you're going to be 4-5. And yes, they've been in a position to win all of these games, but then the problems rear their ugly head, and it's the same old story, same old song and dance for this group, Jack.
Yeah, and it feels like in all these losses, every position group has a hand in it. They make their great plays. I thought the receivers were good tonight, but a Kyle Ford drop on the early in the game leads to a pick. I thought the running backs were good, but they didn't score when it was and goal situations for a lot of the time, and sometimes that's when you just need your running back to break one more tackle. Offensive line, we mentioned the blow-ups. USC feels like a team now that's allowing the opponent's best player to get things done offensively. Denzel Boston goes, I believe, over 100 yards tonight. Jonah Coleman has 2 touchdowns. So it's just a group right now that is not in sync, not playing complementary football. Even the special teams allows a 50-yard return on a day that was probably a really good day for the special teams, but when they get the good returns, can't pay it off for scores in the first quarter. So just not complimentary football, and that's pretty tough to see in year 3 of a head coach, and for the 5th time this year losing a game just like this.
I thought the offensive game plan in the first half was appalling. When Woody Marks is your best player on offense by a mile, for him to only get the 8 touches, and just USC, how many 1st and 10 opportunities did they have where they would throw the ball? Like, the strength of this offense is on the ground. Miller Moss threw 2 first-half interceptions. Like, he's clearly not playing a great game. I don't know why they continue to go through the air in that first half, and then they go on the ground in the second half, and Woody Marks is over 100 yards. So he didn't get in at the end when they needed to. USC did throw the ball on second and goal, which, hindsight's 20/20. They probably should have just run it 4 times the way things were going. I didn't love the pitch play on the third down. I felt like they could have just continued to do what they were doing, where run it up the gut. So I don't know what Lincoln Riley was thinking on offense in that first half to move away from the run the way he did, and the proof was in the pudding, where USC only got the 1 touchdown and just really struggled offensively in that first half. And they're not good enough to be down by that many points. As we've seen, they can't dig themselves out of these holes. Even when they're able to get a lead, like they can't get a stop at the end. And so they're in no position to be down the way they were at halftime, and it ended up costing them yet again. So I didn't like the offensive game plan again. It was good to see Riley acknowledge that he needed to run the ball more, and they ran it in the second half. But, man, that first half, what the heck was that?
30 pass attempts for Miller Moss in the first half against the best pass defense in America in the steady rain. It just doesn't seem like the conditions you brought up. You add on those 2 facts, it didn't make any sense to me from what we saw in the first half. And I thought they addressed their issues in the second half and yet still found a way to be on the losing end.
Yeah, so that was surprising. And Miller Moss had an opportunity to shut some people up on that final drive, and that was disappointing that they weren't able to get it done, and that's just kind of been the consistent theme here. I mean, they had the ball at the end of the game against Penn State, and he throws an interception. They had the ball at the end of the game against Maryland, and they turned the ball over on downs. Had the ball at the end of the game against Minnesota, threw the pick. Had the ball at the end of the game here against Washington. The case for the backup quarterback to come in now is now stronger than ever, especially when USC's 4-5 on the season. You'd expect a Lincoln Riley coach team who has the ball at the end of a lot of these losses to get 1 win, and they just haven't done it. And so Riley deserves a lot of the blame, but Miller Moss deserves some too for sure. And I think fans are correct to ask for Jaden Mayava at this point. Moss has had a lot of chances, and he just hasn't been able to get it done.
Yeah, Moss wanted fans to keep that same energy. I imagine that they probably will. And it'll be a long 2 weeks before USC plays again. And I think the calls are just going to continue to come louder and louder. We don't get to see practice anymore, and we've been told we won't for the rest of the year. So we'll know when you guys do, likely, when USC takes the field against Nebraska.
Yeah, and let me add one more thing. Riley was asked in the postgame press conference, do you think we'll see Jaden Mayava? Is there more of a, do you want to play him more going forward just to give him a chance? And Lincoln Riley's kind of said no. So maybe that's just in the heat of the moment after this game, because I think he's going to have to think long and hard about making a quarterback change. At this point, why not?
Yeah. Well, USC falls below 500 again. Lincoln Riley had never been below 500 in his career. This is now the second time the Trojans are below the 500 mark, and they've got an uphill battle to make a bowl after a loss here to Washington. Tough blow for the Trojans. Once again, they fall on the road, and they've got to go back to Los Angeles and really think things over with a bye week coming. But thank you guys so much for watching Instant Analysis. For Connor Morrissette, I'm Jack Smith. Make sure you check out the rest of the content on USCFootball.com. We'll have the Ghost Notes up, lots of articles posted on the website, as well as here on YouTube, the interviews, the post-game press conference, as well as Tunnel Vision tomorrow night. But thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.